I want to talk about what we do at Two Flame Tango, what makes us different. And one thing that makes us different is that we teach through the whole body. Everything we do, every movement we make, and every step that we teach is taught through the idea of whole self thinking. That was one of Alexander's main pitches. The difficulties with dance and anything in life really is that we bring our entire system into play. Just the act of speaking, every cell in our body is involved in this. Every cell is vibrating. Every breath we take is pumping the system, the blood is flowing. It's this entire complex system that is constantly in flux. So how do you take this and get it to do anything in a coordinated way? And that's the struggle. The system is so complex and there's so many tiny parts to it. And 99% of what's going on inside our skin, totally unconscious. We're not thinking about how our blood moves, how our lymph moves. We're not telling muscle fiber 3A126B to fire at this rate for this long. It happens all on its own. And so we're mostly on autopilot most of the time, and thank God, because it would suck to have to consciously think through tying your shoes every day. But that kind of unconscious patterning that helps us so much throughout our lives becomes the main obstacle when you're trying to learn something new and do something new. It's enough of a challenge to think something new, but to think a new thought that translates into a new arrangement of your musculature is a whole different matter. The movement system is 90% or more unconscious. And what we teach in our school is the consciousness and the intelligence of the movement system as a whole in every step. Just lifting your arms for an embrace requires a gestalt of intention that translates through the body and is very hard to change. Can be very hard to change, especially if you don't think about it. So a lot of dance instruction happens in the specifics. Put your foot here, turn it like this, make sure your knees are going over your toes, blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't take into account the entirety of the movement system, of which usually the extremities are but the last manifestation of, the final word of. That's why Leonardo da Vinci said that grace is in the extremities. Because when you look at the movement system in its entirety, it's a wave that ripples out from the center to the extremes, to the seams. And any interruption in that major flow through the wave results in hindered movement and a limited range of movement. And there's several ways that this system is interrupted. But if this system is interrupted, and it is, then getting one little piece of it to try and coordinate without coordinating the whole to that little piece is why so many people struggle with dance instruction, and why instructors say it over and over until their face is blue. No, you need to put your foot this way. You need to put your foot there. And you watch the people not put their foot there. And you're like, no, put your foot here. And they just can't seem to do it. Because the system is seizing up. And it's not accomplishing the task in an overall coordinated fashion. So this is a real struggle for people when they're learning tango, or when they're studying with dance in general. Because when you receive instruction in an overall sense, until you build up the skill of overall coordination, it can be really frustrating because you're like, no, where does my foot go? And the teacher's like, let's come back into your back and come back away from me and organize your head, neck, back, and then your embrace, and then your feet. And the student's like, well, what does my back have to do with where my foot goes? And it's a paradigm shift that we need to go through. And in the beginning, it's certainly a leap of faith because it's such a different style of thinking. So yeah, the gestalt of the movement system, how it's a direct line of transmission from thought into matter, and how this electrical firing that courses through our system pulses and oscillates and squirms, or it seizes. Well, okay, so a lot of dance is taught in positions. I mean, you study positions to learn how to dance. It's like pitching. There's, I think it's 4 or 5 phases of a pitch, and you get into those different phases of this movement, and then try and flow through it all at once. And a lot of dance is taught by striking a pose and coming up with specific changes and fixes to that pose. And so at best, dances become a stacked together collection of these different pieces of a pose. My head should be turned this way. My arms are like this. My foot is out and this. And wow, all these little things happen at once, and you just get into this position, and it's like a steady state. Whereas working through the wave of integration, the pose is, again, the final word of the movement. And you have different pieces working in relation to each other, and then they fill into this last vibrating ripple of the pose, rather than like a transformer. I don't know how to describe it. But the body, especially when we get little ideas about your hand should be here, your foot should be here, your head should be looking this way, it's really hard to find that out of one movement, and especially one movement that is coordinated in a sequential phrase from the head through the spine, out the limbs to the extremities. But every position and every pose can be attained through the wave of integration. So the position itself is not the problem. It's how we get there, and the instructions that we use to get there, and the sequence of movements that we organize to get into this final pose. And that is one of the definitions of coordination, how we coordinate all these different parts into a whole. And what's so unique about the direction of the Alexander technique, the combination of primary control and direction, is that there's a hierarchy to our movement system. And this hierarchy exists in how we flow through our movement. And it kind of becomes like cars at a traffic light, where they're all stopped, and then as they move, the first one moves, then the second one, then the third one, then the fourth one, and they all kind of flow in that direction. Our head moves off of our back moves off, our tail kicks, the tail flips through the limb girdles onto the elbows and knees and through the wrists and fingers. And it's a sequential phase that's beautiful and wonderful when you get it right. So that's what we do.